As we approach one of the busiest fall seasons for video games that I can remember, I haven't been able to stop dwelling on the games that we aren't even going to be playing for a while. Like, a really long while. In the fallout of E3 2018, I'm more excited than ever before for the games that we will be getting not only over the next 6 months, like Marvel Spider-Man and Red Dead Redemption 2, but those arriving over the next decade as well. I'm Logan Moore, staff writer here at DualShockers, and today I want to take a bit of a deep look into the future to talk about 7 upcoming games that I'm thrilled to play despite not having release dates for any of these games in question. To start things off, let's talk about Cyberpunk 2077, because I was one of the lucky people who got to check out CD Projekt Red's upcoming game last month in a behind closed doors presentation at E3. Cyberpunk is the first game that I have seen that has me truly thinking about next-gen releases in the same way that Watch Dogs did when Ubisoft first revealed that game back in 2012. While that might not inspire much hope considering what the original Watch Dogs became, I have no doubt that Cyberpunk 2077 will meet all of the expectations that I have for it due to the pedigree of CD Projekt. The one thing I continue to think about and dwell on after seeing Cyberpunk 2077 is just how polished and dynamic it was. I've never seen more impressive NPC routines in any game in my life. Cyberpunk 2077's Night City feels like a lived-in place, which is something that I know a lot of developers aim for when making open-world games, but the success rate often isn't very high. Even though I only saw a bit of Cyberpunk being played, it might be the most realistic-looking game world I've ever seen before. I have no idea when Cyberpunk 2077 is going to release, but after seeing the game being played in front of me for nearly an hour, I can tell you this: it's not coming anytime soon. I'm hard-pressed to imagine Cyberpunk appearing on current generation platforms, so I wouldn't get my hopes up for a release on Xbox One or PS4. Hopefully when we make the leap to next-gen consoles, Cyberpunk's release will follow soon after. Next up, let's talk about my boy Hideo Kojima, because his name alone makes me excited for his newest project, Death Stranding. The famed director's upcoming game has been a part of the gaming consciousness for a little over 2 years at this point, and I haven't been able to get enough of the hype cycle surrounding it so far. I'll be honest, the latest trailer that we saw this E3 made me a little less excited for Death Stranding due to some questionable gameplay that I saw from it. But that hasn't undone all of the other excitement that has built up for me from all 3 previous trailers that we've seen of the game. Last year's trailer from the Video Game Awards, which now features the infamous Throat Baby, is probably one of my favorite trailers I've ever seen. Kojima's willingness to be so weird is what sets his games apart more than anything else, and Death Stranding seems to have that weirdness in droves. I'm still of the opinion that Death Stranding won't finally be launching until the release of the PS5, but I'd love to be proven wrong. If anything, it might end up being a cross-generational release for both PS4 and PS5, but as of now it's a bit too early to tell. All I know is that the sooner I can play Kojima's first new IP since Metal Gear Solid, the better. Now, there's probably less to say about this third entry than any other on our list, but I of course have to throw it in. As the follow-up to one of the biggest games of all time in Skyrim, there's a lot to be hopeful and excited about with The Elder Scrolls 6, though there's likely less work done on this game right now than anything else on our list. The Elder Scrolls 6 is so far away that there's not much point in even thinking about it right now, because director Todd Howard has already said the technology isn't even there yet for what they want to do with the game. If I had to guess, Elder Scrolls 6 is likely just a pile of concept art right now sitting in Bethesda Game Studios' office. All of that being said, it has to go on this list purely because of its namesake. The Elder Scrolls is one of the best gaming franchises of all time, and even if the 6th installment doesn't release for another decade, I'm just glad we live in a world where it's now confirmed to exist. Oh, and for the record, I definitely think we're visiting Hammerfell this time around, as I think that's the location they teased in the trailer. Now, this next entry on our list is kind of cheating, considering the game hasn't even been officially announced yet, but still, I feel comfortable putting the next installment in the Bioshock franchise here, because we kind of all but know that the game is in development right now in a secret 2K game studio. To this day, the original Bioshock is still one of, if not my favorite game of all time. I think the stories that all 3 current games in the franchise right now have told are phenomenal, and the cities of both Rapture and Columbia are filled with such fascinating backstories and characters. That and, well, you can kind of shoot bees out of your hands in the first game, and that's awesome. I'm still a bit hesitant to see what this series becomes when not crafted by director Ken Levine, but I'll trust that whoever has creative control of the franchise now will be sure to treat it with care. It's kind of hard to peg a release window on this one, considering we still don't know anything concrete about the next Bioshock, but it's already been over 5 years since Bioshock Infinite released, which is far too long for this series to be quiet much longer, especially when you consider how much money it makes for 2K games. I'd have to hope we'll hear something about this next Bioshock game sometime within the next year, and I'll keep my fingers crossed for E3 2019. Our second Bethesda Game Studios title on this list, Starfield, was finally revealed alongside The Elder Scrolls 6 at E3 2018, After years of rumors and leaks, much like The Elder Scrolls, there's still not much to know about Starfield other than it's Bethesda Game Studios' first new IP in 25 years, and that this time around will be in space. The latter point alone, though, already has me sold. In case you couldn't tell when I talked about The Elder Scrolls 6, I'm a huge fan of Bethesda's past work, and Skyrim and Fallout 3 are each of my 2 favorite games ever. I'm not sure how inline Starfield will be with both of these games, other than it obviously being an RPG, but the thought of an open-world role-playing game in space has me excited purely on concept alone. As for when Starfield might arrive, Todd Howard has already stated that it will be a next-generation game, so don't expect it all that soon. Still, Howard has been candid about how the game is now in active production, and that it will arrive ahead of The Elder Scrolls 6, so it's not as far out as our return to Tamriel will be. There's still a lot left to learn about this one, but considering the pedigree of Bethesda Game Studios' past work, I know that I'll be there on day one whenever it does end up releasing. I'll be honest, the next installment in the God of War series is likely my most anticipated game on this entire list. This year's release of God of War caught me so off guard as someone who didn't care for the original games. After all was said and done, finishing God of War earlier this year, it's now likely one of my favorite games that's ever been made. I wrote a piece earlier this year, which you can find in the description below, and I talked about all of the things that have me excited about God of War 5, but most of it comes back to the narrative. The big success of this year's release of God of War is that it simultaneously built upon everything before it while telling a wholly new story that set things up for years to come. It's way too early to begin even thinking about God of War 5 too much just yet. Not even being 6 months removed from this year's release, the next God of War almost certainly won't arrive until the PS5 releases, but that hasn't stopped me from dwelling on just what it will have in store. If you saw the game's final epilogue cutscene, you'll likely know exactly why I'm so excited about the next iteration of God of War. Last but certainly not least on this list, let's look at Halo Infinite. I'll be the first to admit that Halo 5 had its fair share of issues. It was a letdown on a lot of fronts, especially when it comes to the story, but man, this new trailer for Halo Infinite has me reeled back in. It's hard for me not to be excited about the next installment in arguably the best shooter franchise ever. For nearly 20 years now, I've been a massive Halo fan, and that's not going to change with Infinite. Even if the story once again disappoints, the release of a new Halo game always brings a group of my friends and I back together as we pour collectively dozens of hours into the game's multiplayer. I also hate to sound cliche, but I feel different about Halo Infinite. The tone of that announcement trailer that we saw is far more unique and rooted in what the series originally was back with Combat Evolved. Yes, you could say it had similarities to Halo 5's own reveal in terms of tone, but Infinite just seems like it's going to be different, and in a good way. Microsoft and 343 Industries have been very dodgy about Halo Infinite so far, but I'm hoping we'll start to see more worthwhile information in 2019. Even though it's not impossible, I highly doubt Halo Infinite will release in 2019, and I'd say we'll likely be playing this one sometime the following year in 2020. So that's everything in the far-flung future that I'm most excited to play, whenever that will be. What are some of the games you're looking forward to the most, though, that we still don't really know release windows for? Be sure to let me know down in the comments, and if you like the video, be sure to leave a like and all that other good YouTube stuff. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to let me know down in the comments, because we're trying some different video content around here at DualShockers, and I'd love to get your feedback on if you're enjoying these kinds of videos. So be sure to give me a heads up or let me know on Twitter at moreman12. For everything else DualShockers, remember to just keep following us over at DualShockers.com, subscribe here on the YouTube channel, or be sure to follow us over on Twitter at DualShockers. Until next time, see ya.